Let's start with something obvious that nobody likes to say out loud. We all can't be astronauts. Not because we didn't believe hard enough, not because we lacked vision or failed to manifest our destiny, not because society failed us or held us back with invisible barriers, not because the universe conspired against our dreams or we missed some cosmic sign, but because there are limits. Real, mathematical, unglamorous limits. Seats, slots, cutoffs, capacity constraints. NASA selects roughly 10 to 12 astronaut candidates every 2 years from thousands of applicants. That's not opinion. That's arithmetic. And here's what separates children from adults. Pretending those limits don't exist doesn't make you optimistic or brave or a visionary. It makes you late. Late to the actual work. Late to the strategy that might actually succeed. Late to building something that fits the world as it is, not as you wish it were. Think about what it actually takes to become an astronaut. Thousands apply. People with PhDs, test pilot experience, engineering backgrounds, impeccable health, clearances, accomplished people. People who've already succeeded at difficult things. A handful get selected, maybe 12, maybe 8, and even among those who are qualified, genuinely, objectively qualified, most never make it. You can check every box. You can do everything right. You can be exactly what they're looking for and still not get picked because there aren't enough seats. And here's the part that matters, the part that makes this more than just a story about space. That's not unique to astronauts. That exact dynamic, the narrowing funnel, the brutal math, the qualified people who don't make it, that's true for professional musicians who can actually play athletes who train their entire childhood filmmakers with talent and a vision, founders with solid ideas and work ethic, influencers creating quality content, academics, publishing real research, artists who've mastered their craft, every field you admire, every career that looks meaningful from the outside has a funnel. And that funnel gets narrow fast. The lie we're sold, the one that sounds inspiring in a TED Talk, is that passion overrides math, that wanting it badly enough bends reality. It doesn't. Modern motivation culture has a problem, a fundamental one. It treats desire as evidence. If you want it badly enough, that means something. No, it means you want it badly. That's it. That's all it means. Wanting is not a credential. It's not a competitive advantage. Dreaming is not a signal that you're on the right path. And interest, casual or even intense interest, is not the same thing as aptitude. The world does not reward sincerity. It doesn't care how authentic your desire feels or how long you've held onto your dream. It rewards utility, timing, and leverage. It rewards people who solve problems that need solving, who show up when the opportunity is ripe, who have the skills, resources, or positioning to execute. That's not cynical. That's not me being dark or pessimistic or trying to crush your spirit. That's reality. And reality is the only place where progress happens, the only place where you can build something that lasts. You don't get to opt out of physics, economics, or competition because your story is compelling. Here's a question most people never answer honestly, not even to themselves. Why do I want this? Not the polished answer, not the elevator pitch, not the one you'd say on a podcast or write in a journal you might show someone someday. The real one. Do you want it because it's respected? Because people light up when you tell them what you do? It looks good from the outside? Because the lifestyle seems appealing in Instagram posts? It proves something to someone. An ex, a parent, a person who doubted you? It rescues you from feeling average, from the terror of being unremarkable. A lot of dreams collapse the moment you remove the audience. If nobody could see the outcome, if there were no recognition, no status, no proof of achievement, if you couldn't tell anyone, couldn't post about it, couldn't even mention it at parties, would you still want the process, the daily grind, the unglamorous parts, the repetition, the failure, the years of obscurity? If the answer is no, that's not a calling. That's not purpose. That's cosplay. That's theater. That's you auditioning for a role in someone else's idea of an impressive life. You are not starting from the same place as everyone else. This isn't controversial. It's just true. Different parents, different resources, different early education, different neurochemistry, different temperaments, different tolerances for risk, boredom, uncertainty, and pain. Different networks, different safety nets. Some people can afford to fail for 5 years while they figure it out. Others can't afford to fail for 5 months. Comparison doesn't just steal joy, it distorts strategy. You start chasing goals that only make sense for someone else's life, someone else's starting point, someone else's advantages. You look at the YouTuber who built an audience in 6 months and think you're failing because you're at month 7 with nothing to show. What you don't see, they had a decade of video production experience, a friend with a production company, and no day job. Running someone else's race guarantees one thing: you'll lose, and you won't know why. Your job is not to be impressive, not to match what other people are doing, or to prove you can do what they did. Your job is to be effective, to win the game you're actually playing, with a hand you're actually holding. Let's talk about a mistake that quietly ruins lives. Not dramatically, not in a way that makes for a good story, just slowly, over decades. You're good at something, maybe even great. People come to you for it. You solve it faster than others. It comes naturally. You've built a reputation around it, even if you didn't mean to. But it doesn't match your fantasy. It doesn't fit the narrative you've been telling yourself about who you are or who you're supposed to become. So you ignore it. You downplay it. You say, "But I don't want to be that. That's not really me. That's not the dream. I didn't work this hard just to do that." Meanwhile, you bet your future on something you're mediocre at. Something that feels cooler, more creative, more aligned with the identity you want. And you call that authenticity. That's not authenticity. That's ego with better branding. Here's what the world actually teaches, quietly through results. In the long run, genius beats passion, and leverage beats vibes. You don't find meaning by rejecting your advantages, by pretending you're too good for the thing you're actually good at. You find it by using them well, by building on what works, by letting your actual strengths compound instead of fighting them because they're not cinematic enough. Here's the truth. This entire series is built on meaning isn't discovered. It's not hiding under a rock, waiting for you to stumble onto it during a breakthrough moment. It's constructed under constraints, real constraints: time, money, ability, circumstance, competition. You don't get infinite paths. You don't get to sample every possibility and then choose. You don't get to live in the version of reality where everything that sounds good is also achievable. You get your path, the one that's actually available to you, given who you are and where you're starting. And the faster you stop pretending you're exempt from reality, the faster you stop waiting for the universe to make an exception for your particular story, the faster you can build something real, something that works, something that lasts, something that doesn't depend on the world changing its rules to accommodate your preferences. We all can't be astronauts, but every one of us can stop lying about why we want the suit. Most people can explain themselves to other people just fine. They have reasons, justifications, a narrative that sounds good out loud, something coherent enough to survive a dinner party or a networking event. But almost nobody takes the time to explain themselves to themselves. Not really. Not in private, where there's no performance, no audience to impress, no story to maintain. And until you do that work, until you can account for your own motivations without the polish, you're not making choices. You're just reacting to whatever stimulus happens to be loudest. Here's something uncomfortable that most people never confront. You didn't come up with most of your goals on your own. You absorbed them. From parents who projected their regrets onto your possibilities. From culture that packaged certain outcomes as making it. From school systems that rewarded specific traits and punished others. From whatever you happened to see, celebrated at the right developmental moment in your life. At some point, probably when you were young and impressionable, an idea slipped in quietly. This is what success looks like. And instead of interrogating it, instead of asking whether it actually fits who you are or what you value, you chased it. Not because it was right for you, but because it was available, because it was already there, pre-packaged, with a clear path and social approval baked in. Most people spend their entire lives chasing goals they never chose. They inherited them, and inheritance isn't the same thing as ownership. There's a question that sounds simple and is anything but, why do I want what I want? Not what do I want? That's easy. Everyone has a list. Not how do I get it? That's just tactics. Why? Why this goal and not another? Why does this matter to you specifically? What happens if you get it? What happens if you don't? If you can't answer those questions cleanly, if you fumble or reach for cliches or give an answer that could apply to anyone, your motivation will leak at the first sign of real friction. Try this exercise. No audience, no performance, no one watching. Take one goal you claim to care about, something you say you're working toward, and ask why 5 times in a row. Don't skip steps. Don't get philosophical. Just follow the thread. You'll be shocked how fast the answers fall apart, how quickly you hit bedrock that's either embarrassingly shallow or disturbingly dark. I want to make a lot of money. Why? So I can feel secure. Why do you need to feel secure? Because I hate uncertainty. Why do you hate uncertainty? Because I don't trust myself to handle problems without a buffer. Now we're finally somewhere useful. Now we're talking about something real that you can actually address. A lot of people confuse wanting with needing. They use the words interchangeably, as if they mean the same thing. They don't. Wanting is emotional. It's about feeling, about identity, about what you think having something will say about you. Needing is structural. It's about function, about what's actually required for the outcome you're trying to build. You might want to be admired, but what you need is competence that delivers consistent results. You might want freedom, the Instagram version, the laptop on a beach version. But what you need is leverage, skills that create options, resources that buy back your time. You might want passion, work that makes you feel alive, that aligns with your values. That tells a good story. But what you need is a skill you can deploy on command, regardless of whether you're inspired that day. If your goals are built on wants alone, on feelings that shift with your mood or your confidence, they'll collapse the moment the external applause stops, the moment no one's watching to validate that you made the right choice. Needs are durable, wants are not. Every fantasy comes with a tax, a cost that's invisible from the outside but unavoidable from the inside. People see the outcome, The title, the lifestyle, the freedom, the respect. They see the version that gets posted and celebrated. What they don't see, what they actively ignore, is the process. They want the lifestyle of a successful creator, without asking what kind of person survives years of obscurity and inconsistent income. They want the title of founder or executive, without tolerating the boredom, the repetitive decision-making, the endless meetings that earn it. They want the identity of artist or entrepreneur, without the repetition, the rejection, the silence, the months where nothing works and no one cares. If you're unwilling to pay the tax, if you romanticize the outcome but recoil from the actual daily reality, the fantasy is not for you. And that's not a failure. That's not you being weak or lacking discipline. That's clarity. That's information. That's you learning something important about what you actually value versus what you think you should value. Here's a brutal but extraordinarily useful question. Who am I trying to prove this to? Because if your goal disappears when no one's watching, if it loses its appeal the moment you imagine never being able to tell anyone about it, it was never about meaning. It was about validation. And validation is a terrible fuel source. It burns hot and fast, gives you a temporary surge of motivation, but it leaves nothing behind. No residue, no compounding progress. The moment the validation stops, and it always stops because people get bored, they move on, they find someone newer and more interesting to pay attention to, you're empty. The most durable goals survive obscurity. They survive anonymity. They survive indifference. They survive being alone in a room with just the work and no proof that it matters. If you can't find motivation without an audience, you don't have a calling. You have a dependency. The world is loud. Everyone is selling you a version of success that conveniently includes them at the center of it. Everyone's narrative just happens to validate the choices they already made. Your job is not to listen harder, not to consume more content, read more books, follow more thought leaders. Your job is to filter better. Signal feels quiet, unsexy, often boring. It doesn't promise transformation in 30 days. It doesn't come with a compelling origin story. It just works. Noise feels urgent, exciting, full of promises and inspiration and momentum. It wants you to act now, before you miss out, before the opportunity closes. If you don't deliberately separate the two, if you treat urgency as equivalent to importance, you'll spend your entire life chasing static. You'll be busy. You'll feel like you're making progress. You'll have a lot of starts. But you won't build anything that lasts. Explaining yourself to yourself is not about self-love or positive affirmations or finding your authentic self. It's about self-respect. It's saying, I'm not going to build my life on borrowed desires. I'm not going to chase goals I don't actually want because I'm afraid of what not chasing them might mean. Until you do this work, until you understand why you want what you want, stripped of performance and pretense, every decision feels heavy. Every setback feels personal. Every pivot feels like failure. Every comparison wounds you. But once you understand your actual motivations, once you separate what you genuinely value from what you think you're supposed to value, something shifts. Trade-offs stop feeling like losses. They start feeling like choices, clear ones. Next time, we're going to talk about running your race and why copying someone else's path guarantees confusion, exhaustion, and wasted effort. We all can't be astronauts, but we can stop pretending we don't know why we're wearing the helmet. Comparison doesn't just steal joy, it steals clarity. And once clarity is gone, once you lose sight of your actual constraints, your actual advantages, your actual starting point, effort gets wasted in directions that were never meant for you in the first place. If you don't consciously run your own race, you will unconsciously run someone else's. And you'll wonder why you're exhausted, why nothing's working, why you feel behind, despite doing everything right. No one starts at the same place, not in talent, not in temperament, not in support systems, not in timing. Some people were trained early, had parents who recognized their aptitude and invested in coaches, lessons, equipment, had adults who believed in them and cleared obstacles. Some people were protected, had financial safety nets, could afford to fail for years without catastrophic consequences, could take risks that would destroy someone starting from poverty or instability. Some people were encouraged, were told they were capable, were surrounded by examples of success, absorbed confidence as a default setting rather than having to construct it from scratch. Some people were lucky, were born in the right place, at the right time, with the right genes, into the right networks. And none of that, absolutely none of it, is evenly distributed. When you compare outcomes without accounting for starting lines, you don't get motivation, you don't get useful information, you get distortion. You get a false sense of what's possible, what's required, what timeline makes sense. You start making plans that only work in someone else's life, with someone else's resources, someone else's risk tolerance, someone else's completely different set of constraints. Comparison is seductive because it promises certainty. If I do what they did, I'll get what they got. It looks like a formula, like a recipe you can follow, like proof that success is replicable if you just work hard enough, believe hard enough, copy the steps precisely enough. But that's not how reality works. You don't see their unseen advantages, the mentor who made an introduction, the trust fund that bought them 3 years to experiment, the spouse who covered expenses while they built. You don't see their specific constraints, the trade-offs they made that you might not be willing to make, the parts of their life they sacrificed that you actually value. You don't see their off-camera failures, the ventures that collapsed, the relationships that ended, the years of obscurity they don't mention in the highlight reel. You don't see their tolerance for specific kinds of pain. Some people can handle financial uncertainty, but crack under social pressure. Others thrive in chaos, but can't sustain repetitive work. You see the polished outcome and mistake it for a roadmap. That's not inspiration, that's miscalculation. And miscalculation costs years. One of the most damaging forms of comparison is time. They're younger than me and already further along. They figured it out already. I'm behind. Behind what? An imaginary schedule you never agreed to. A timeline that exists nowhere except in your head, constructed from social media posts and cherry-picked success stories. Progress is not linear. It doesn't move at a steady pace for everyone in every field, and it's definitely not synchronized. Some people peak early. They get their wins in their 20s, burn bright, and then plateau or fade. Some people peak late. They build slowly, with setbacks and detours, and hit their stride in their 40s or 50s. And when they do, they often last longer, because their foundation is more solid. Some people build incrementally, small wins that compound, nothing dramatic, nothing that makes headlines, just steady improvement over decades. The only timeline that matters, the only one that's actually useful, is this. Are you moving forward from where you actually are? Not from where you wish you were, not from where someone else started. From your actual position, with your actual resources, at your actual age. That's the only comparison that generates useful information. When emulation turns into self-sabotage, 6 to 7:45. Learning from others is smart. Studying what works, what doesn't, what patterns repeat across successful people, that's essential. Becoming a clone is not. There's a line, and most people cross it without realizing. The moment you suppress your own strengths to imitate someone else's, the moment you start doing things their way, because it looks right rather than because it actually fits who you are, you're trading advantage for familiarity. You stop asking, what works for me? What leverages my specific strengths, tolerates my specific constraints, fits my specific life? And you start asking, what looks legitimate? What will people respect? What matches the pattern I've seen rewarded? That shift alone, that move from self-alignment to external validation, is enough to stall a life. Because now you're optimizing for appearances rather than results, for comfort rather than effectiveness, for fitting in rather than winning the game you're actually playing. This is where people get it wrong, where they misunderstand what run your own race actually means. Running your race is not an excuse. It's not settling. It's not giving up on excellence, because excellence is hard. It's not about lowering standards. It's not about making peace with mediocrity because you're afraid of competition. It's about choosing relevant excellence over borrowed prestige. It's saying, I will be judged by the rules of the path I'm on, not someone else's. I will compete where my advantages actually matter, not where they're neutralized by the wrong environment. That takes more honesty, not less. More self-awareness, more courage to disappoint people who expected you to chase conventional markers of success. It's harder to run your own race than to follow someone else's. Because when you run your own race, the results are your responsibility. You can't blame the path. You can't say, I did what they did and it didn't work. You chose it. You own it. When you're aligned with your own constraints and strengths, when you stop fighting reality and start working with it, something subtle happens. Decisions get lighter. They stop feeling heavy, weighted with significance and anxiety. Trade-offs make sense. You stop agonizing over what you're giving up because you understand what you're gaining. Effort compounds instead of leaking. Instead of spreading yourself across 10 different approaches that all feel slightly wrong, you focus. And focus is where progress lives. You stop oscillating between envy and self-doubt, between why can't I do what they're doing and maybe I'm just not good enough, because you're no longer playing a game you can't win. You're playing one where your odds improve with time and consistency. Focus returns, and focus is rare. Most people never experience sustained focus because they're constantly course-correcting based on what everyone else is doing. When you commit to your own race, focus becomes possible. And once you have focus, progress becomes inevitable. You don't need a better race. You need the right one. The one that fits your actual life, your actual strengths, your actual constraints, your actual definition of success, stripped of performance and pretense. Comparison will always offer shortcuts. It will always show you someone who got there faster, easier, younger, and it will whisper that you should be doing what they're doing. But those shortcuts come with hidden costs you don't see until it's too late, until you've spent years optimizing for someone else's game and realized you never actually wanted the prize. Run your race, accept your starting line, play the long game that actually belongs to you, not the one that looks best from the outside, the one that works from the inside. Next time, we're going to talk about the "but I don't wanna" fallacy, and why ignoring your strengths is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make. We all can't be astronauts, but we can stop racing towards someone else's finish line. There's a phrase that sounds harmless, almost honest, almost like self-awareness, but I don't want to. And for a lot of people, that sentence, that simple, childish refusal, quietly decides their entire future, not because they couldn't do the thing, not because they lacked the capacity or the opportunity, but because they refused to respect what they were already good at, because it didn't match their fantasy, because it didn't fit the story they'd been telling themselves about who they were supposed to become. Here's the pattern. You see it everywhere once you start looking for it. You have a real, usable advantage, something you're naturally better at than most people, something that comes easily, that you can deploy consistently, that others recognize and value. And instead of leaning into it, instead of building on that foundation, using it as leverage to create options, you dismiss it. It's boring. It doesn't excite you. It doesn't feel creative or impressive or meaningful. It's not special. Everyone can do it. It's not unique enough to build an identity around. That's not the dream. It doesn't match the version of success you've been imagining. It doesn't fit the narrative you want to live. So you aim for something flashier, something you like more, something that feels more aligned with who you think you are or who you want to become. And you bet your future on a weakness, on something you're mediocre at, while leaving your actual strength untouched, unused, gathering dust. That's not courage. That's not authenticity. That's not following your passion. That's denial with good branding. Let's make it concrete. Let's make it specific enough that you can see yourself in it. You're a mediocre guitarist. Not terrible. You can play. You know the basics. But not special. Not gifted. Yes, in a room full of guitarists, you're invisible. But you want to be a rock star. You always have. That's been the dream since you were a teenager. That's the fantasy that sustained you through boring jobs and difficult years. At the same time, and this is the part that matters, you're a genius-level carpenter. You solve spatial problems intuitively. You see how things fit together before you measure. People seek you out because your work is objectively excellent. You have a reputation. You get referrals. You could build a thriving business if you wanted to. But you don't want to be just a carpenter. That feels like settling, like giving up, like admitting that the dream is dead and you're resigned to something practical and unglamorous. So you grind the guitar. Year after year, you practice, you play open mics, you record demos, you audition for bands. You're competing against people who are obsessed, gifted, and relentless. People for whom music is not a passion project, but a calling. People who hear things you don't hear, who practice in ways you can't sustain. Meanwhile, the thing you could build a life on, the thing that could create financial stability, creative satisfaction, and a sustainable career, sits unused. This isn't romantic. This isn't noble. This isn't you staying true to yourself. This is expensive. This is you paying interest on a fantasy. Here's the lie that causes this mistake, the one that sounds inspiring but destroys lives. Follow your passion. It's bad advice, not because passion doesn't matter, but because passion alone is not a strategy. Passion doesn't create skill. It amplifies it. Passion plus talent equals momentum. You get somewhere. You improve faster than others. You sustain effort because the work itself is rewarding. Passion plus mediocrity equals frustration. You care deeply about something you're not good at. You work hard and plateau. You watch others pass you with less effort. You burn out or grow bitter. You can grow skill, yes, absolutely, with practice, with coaching, with time. But starting points matter. Ceilings exist. And ignoring that reality doesn't make you noble or determined. It makes you statistically irrelevant. One more person betting on hope instead of leverage. People reject their strengths for predictable, understandable reasons. It doesn't match the identity they want. They've been telling themselves a story about who they are. I'm creative. I'm an artist. I'm not a corporate person. And the strength doesn't fit that narrative. It feels too easy to count as real work. If it comes naturally, it must not be valuable. If it's not a struggle, it must not be meaningful. They confuse effort with worth. It doesn't earn instant admiration. No one gasps when you tell them. It's not impressive at parties. It doesn't generate the social validation they're craving. Someone else told them it wasn't special. A parent, a teacher, a peer dismissed it early. Said everyone can do that, or that's not a real career. And they internalize that judgment. So they chase struggle instead of leverage. They equate suffering with purpose. They think if they're not fighting uphill, they're not growing. But struggle is not proof of meaning. It's just resistance. And sometimes resistance is just the friction of being in the wrong place. This is the hardest part to accept. The part that requires real honesty. Sometimes I don't wanna really means I don't want to accept what I'm good at, because accepting it means letting go of a fantasy. Admitting that the version of success you've been imagining might not be the one that's actually available to you. Being judged on something real. When you chase a fantasy, you can always say, I never really tried. When you commit to your actual strength, the results are undeniable. Failure becomes visible. Taking responsibility for outcomes. When you use your strength, you can't hide behind, I'm still learning, or it's not my natural fit. You're expected to deliver, and that's terrifying. It's safer to chase a dream you'll never quite reach than to commit to a path where results are unavoidable. That's ego protecting itself. That's fear disguised as ambition. That's pride masquerading as passion. Here's what actually happens in the long run. People who build on their strengths gain options. They develop financial stability, professional credibility, a reputation that opens doors, relationships with people who value their work, and options create freedom. Freedom to experiment. Freedom to explore other interests. Freedom to eventually pursue the things they're passionate about, but from a position of security rather than desperation. Very few people start with their dream. Very few people get to do exactly what they want from day one. Most earn the right to explore it. They build leverage first. They create a foundation, and then, only then, they have the resources and freedom to pursue expression. Leverage first, expression second. That order matters. Reverse it, and you spend your life struggling. Chasing passion from a place of scarcity, resenting the world for not rewarding your sincerity. You don't dishonor yourself by using what you're good at. You don't betray your dreams by building on your actual strengths instead of your imagined ones. You dishonor yourself by pretending those strengths don't count. By leaving them unused while you chase fantasies that don't fit your reality. Your strengths are not a trap. They're not a consolation prize. They're not what you settle for when you give upon the real dream. They're a doorway. The only one that's actually open. You can walk through it. Build something real, sustainable, valuable, or you can stand outside arguing with reality, insisting the door you want should be the one that opens. Next time, we're going to talk about limited availability and why pretending every field has room for everyone sets people up for disappointment they never needed. We all can't be astronauts, but refusing to use the tools you already have is the surest way. to never leave the ground. Every field has a door, and behind that door, no matter how wide it looks from the outside, no matter how many success stories you've heard, there's a very small room. The problem isn't that people don't know this. Everyone knows, intellectually, that success is competitive. The problem is that they quietly, privately believe it won't apply to them. There is no path with unlimited winners. None. Not art, not business, not tech, not sports, not entertainment, not academia, not content creation. Every single field you admire, every career path that looks meaningful from the outside has capacity constraints. Even fields that expand, that add new jobs, new opportunities, new platforms, still bottleneck. The top tier is always crowded. Always. You're not competing against amateurs. You're competing against people who are talented, trained, well-connected, and working harder than you. The middle tier is unstable. It looks okay from a distance, but it's precarious. One algorithm change, one market shift, one economic downturn, and you're scrambling. And the bottom tier is invisible. You can work full-time in a field and never break even. Never get noticed. Never build anything that lasts. This isn't unfair. This isn't the system being rigged against you. This isn't gatekeeping or discrimination or bad luck. This is math. This is supply and demand. This is reality functioning exactly as you'd expect if you thought about it for 5 minutes without the inspirational soundtrack. Delusion doesn't come from stupidity. It doesn't come from naivety or laziness or lack of research. It comes from stories. From highlight reels that compress 10 years of grinding into a 2-minute success montage. From survivorship bias that only shows you the winners and hides the thousands who tried and failed. From social media timelines that make it look like everyone's career is accelerating except yours, that show the celebration but hide the years of obscurity that preceded it. You see the outcome, the book deal, the funding round, the viral video, the sold-out show, and you don't see thousands who aimed at the exact same door and didn't fit through it. The silence hides the truth. The people who fail don't post about it. Don't write Medium articles titled, "How I Gave Up My Dream and What I Learned." Don't create YouTube videos about why their startup collapsed or their music career went nowhere. They just disappear. They get quiet. They move on to something else, usually without fanfare. And that silence creates a distorted picture of what's possible, makes it look like everyone who really tries eventually succeeds, makes scarcity invisible. Effort matters, obviously. No one succeeds without work, but effort does not override saturation. It does not neutralize competition. It does not exempt you from math. You can work incredibly hard, put in the hours, make the sacrifices, develop the skills, and still be replaceable. Still be one of 1,000 people with similar credentials, similar ambition, similar dedication. In crowded fields, hard work is the entry fee. It's the baseline. It's what gets you in the room, not what gets you picked. The differentiator is something else: timing, positioning, network, unique angle, luck, something you can't always control or replicate. If your plan relies on being one of the many who want it badly, you don't have a plan. You have hope. And hope is not a strategy. This part hurts. This is the part people take personally, even when they shouldn't. Getting filtered out, not making it through the narrow door, does not mean you're unworthy. It does not mean you're a failure. It does not mean you didn't work hard enough, or believe enough, or want it enough. It means the system had more qualified candidates than available chairs. That's it. That's all it means. Selection is not a referendum on your value as a human being. It's a constraint of reality, a function of scarcity, a mathematical inevitability when supply exceeds demand. The faster you separate those two things, the faster you stop interpreting rejection as a judgment of your worth. The faster you stop bleeding confidence in places where it doesn't belong. You can be good and not get picked. You can be qualified and still lose. You can do everything right and still not make it. That's not injustice. That's reality being honest with you in a way that motivational culture refuses to be. Smart people don't ignore scarcity. They don't pretend it doesn't exist or that they're somehow exempt from it. They work with it. They look for adjacent roles. If the main door is jammed with competition, they find the side entrance, the related field that's less saturated but uses similar skills. They create hybrid skill sets. They combine two areas of competence in ways that are rare. Being good at A and good at B might not be unique, but being good at both simultaneously often is. They move where demand is rising, not peaking. They don't chase fields where everyone else is already chasing. They look for emerging opportunities, underserved niches, problems that haven't been solved yet. They choose games where their odds improve over time, where experience compounds, where being 5 years in gives them an advantage over someone just starting, rather than a field where youth is prized and veterans are discarded. They don't insist on the front door if a side entrance exists. Pride closes options. Strategy opens them. Here's a reframe that changes everything. Scarcity isn't just a barrier. It's information. It tells you where competition is fiercest, where you're fighting uphill, where small differences in talent or luck or timing have outsized impacts on outcomes. It tells you where differentiation matters most, where being pretty good isn't good enough, where you need something rare or unique or unexpected to stand out. It tells you where small advantages compound or vanish, where network effects snowball, where early movers dominate and latecomers struggle. If everyone wants the same outcome, the real opportunity is often near it, not inside it. Adjacent to the saturated market, serving the same audience from a different angle, solving a related problem that everyone else is ignoring. Most people never look sideways. They fixate on the main prize and miss everything else. Unlimited belief in a limited system creates disappointment, not because the world is cruel or because you're unlucky, but because expectations were careless, because you built a plan around hope instead of data, because you confused wanting something with being entitled to it. Reality isn't here to stop you. It's not conspiring against you. It's not trying to crush your dreams. It's here to shape you, to give you information, to show you where the constraints are so you can design around them. Next time, we're going to talk about FOMO and how fear of missing out quietly fractures focus, commitment, and progress. We all can't be astronauts, but understanding how many seats there actually are lets you choose a trajectory that actually lands.